I'm June Kales. I'm here in Los Angeles, and it's no longer raining. The sun is actually coming. I'm a disability policy consultant and a contractor with CFILC, is the California Foundation of Independent Living Centers, California Disaster Coalition. So, welcome. And just to begin, I want to let y'all know that we've got several more topic calls in the planning stages for the second Thursday of every month. And next month, we'll be exploring homelessness and disability and issues around Project Room Key to Home Key, and COVID-19, warming centers, cooling centers, personal assistance, IHSS, as it relates to homelessness, and as COVID relates to homelessness, a whole bunch of issues. And then in May, we'll be talking to the Inland Empire Health Plan about how they use a geographic information system, or GIS as we all refer to it in shorthand, to protect people with disabilities in emergencies, how they locate members, and how they use that during the wildfires and the power outages. So that should be a very intriguing discussion as well. And there are a lot more topics in the planning stages around transportation in emergencies, Uber and Lyft, long-term recovery issues, issues around what's in your go bag, issues around healthcare advocacy, and what kind of personal advocate should we all have in our back pocket if we need one to help us advocate in healthcare systems. So today, I want to welcome our two panelists, Alex Hatcher I'm going to mess up that last name, Alex. Schoenbachler, who's the IL coordinator and emergency preparedness coordinator at Marysville Center for Independent Living in Washington State, and Brian Snyder, who's at Free Center for Independent Living in Nevada County, and he's the emergency preparedness coordinator up there, in Grass Valley, California. So we've asked Alex and Brian to address a number of questions which you'll probably have seen once in the reminder for this call. So we're going to start with Brian, and he and I are going to do a kind of a Q&A for about 15 minutes. Then we'll switch to Alex, and then we'll have a full, about 60 minutes for a comfortable and casual discussion with all of you. So, Brian, starting with you, why don't you introduce yourself first?
Can you hear me?
Just fine.
Excellent. Thank you so much, June, for asking me to be a part of this panel. I'm Brian Snyder. I'm Freed's Emergency Preparedness Coordinator, working under the Disability Disaster Access and Resource Center. We're one of those through CFILC. And as you know, Anna Acton is a ILC rock star, and she's been working on emergency preparedness for a long time. And I was originally Freed's Disability Community Advocate. And then in June, I transitioned into the position of Emergency Preparedness Coordinator. And so we're covering El Dorado, Placer, Colusa, Nevada, Sutter, Yuba, Sierra counties. So that's our catchment area. So we're doing basically what I do is help with preparing people, assisting them with their personal emergency preparedness plans. And as part of our DDAR program, we're offering batteries, and hotel stays, food vouchers, and gas cards for public safety power shutoff mitigation solutions. So we offer batteries, depending, we're still working within the ILC consumer driven model. So if, we advise whether a battery or hotel stay is the best solution, but it's ultimately the consumer's choice. And so that's my primary duty, is working on that, along with assisting with personal emergency preparedness plans. And we've recently did a drive-through event where we deployed over 500, actually 500, sorry, emergency supplies and PPE. And we just recently received the shipment of 200 fully packed emergency supply kits, and I'll be deploying those to those in need. And so that's primarily the work that is being done.
Right. What does DDAR stand for?
DDAR?
Right.
It's Disability, Disaster, Access, and Resources, and that's the program administered through CFILC, and it's a contract partnership with PG&E.
Okay, thank you.
Specifically for public safety power shutoff mitigation solutions.
Okay. So in terms of your work on individual emergency plans with people that your center supports, how do you go about that, and how much time is involved, and what do you concentrate on first?
I remember the questions a little bit, so I want to address the first question because I think the first question was asked, what does it take? And I would like to note that I have several disabilities. I have a condition called Usher syndrome type 2A, which causes blindness and deafness. And I also have mental health disability, obsessive compulsive disorder. And so in this position, it requires an immense amount of empathy and patience. And, every day, I hear a great deal of pain and suffering. A lot of people, everything, whatever they've been dealing with, either disability related or financial, is made even more stressful because of the pandemic. So, as people with disabilities, we often isolate ourselves. And with the pandemic, it's even worse. That isolation becomes even more stressful. And so there's a lot of pain and suffering and just a myriad of emotions, from anger to depression. And so when somebody calls, and that's the funny thing is ILCs are not generally emergency responders, but in this situation, we kind of are, because people are generally calling in a very desperate mindset, and they're seeking immediate solutions, and we are having to respond in real time. So, especially during public safety power shutoffs, people are calling and they're, rightfully so concerned that if they lose power, they may lose their life. So that's kind of the context of the work that's being done. To answer your question with regards to personal emergency preparedness plans, what I do and is, I go through, and this is the kind of model we're using, the Listos campaign, which is a part of the governor's Office of Emergency Services campaign. And there are 4 steps. And the 4 steps are finding 5 trusted allies. That's number 1, to contact an emergency. Number 2, making a list of medications and medical devices. And number 3, having an emergency supply kit or a go bag. And then number 4, finding your escape routes. So those are the 4 primary aspects that we focus on when assisting a consumer with an emergency preparedness plan. And what I notice in the process of that is the most difficult one is number 1, is finding 5 trusted allies. When I mention this, people will either get upset or they'll start crying, or Um, there's a wide range of emotions that are attached to this question. And so I have to be very careful how I approach it. Because if I say you need five trusted allies, that scares people because many people will say, I don't have anybody. And I said, you have family members? And they say, I don't have anybody. And I try to go through it. I go, okay, well, if you don't have family, do you have any friends, any neighbors? This is a great opportunity. If you don't know your neighbors, to connect with them in a way that you feel comfortable, either by direct contact, but it's difficult with COVID-19, or leaving a note or something just to let them know you're there and these are your needs and you're willing to help them in any way they can. So I try to kind of work through that and ask, are there any church organizations that you belong to where there's people that you can contact in an emergency and vice versa. And so that is the most difficult one. That's a systemic problem because I think it's part of our culture, our kind of rugged individualism, kind of that Clint Eastwood, John Wayne kind of mentality of being independent. And as everybody here knows, we're more interdependent than anything. And that kind of that rugged individualism is really a false sense of security, and it's really an illusion. Um, and so that's a real issue, and I think Anna and I constantly are trying to address it with um, um, our local officials, our community partners, and it's something that is a massive challenge. And I mention it at every meeting I have because no matter how often I try to work through it with the consumer, sometimes there isn't a solution. They just don't know what to do. And so I think that's one of the issues that I encounter every time I go through a plan. Um, I hope that answers your question.
Um, yes, it's striking what kind of emotions Five Trusted Allies brings up. So that's why you concentrate on first because of that importance. And then as you mentioned listos in these five areas, and maybe we should post a link to that in chat, or we can add it to the handouts later. Are there other kinds of helpful tools you used? You mentioned five areas. You talked a lot about the first one. So do you want to talk a little bit about the other four or any other tools that you use?
Yeah, let's, I think the second one is probably the easiest because which is making a list of medications and a list of medical devices and accessories. That's the easiest one because it's the most people can connect to that. They know their medications. And asking them to write it down and have it in multiple formats, digital as well. I think sometimes the most challenging part of that is when we talk about digital, we usually talk about a cloud-based services like Google Docs to have that so it's accessible from any location. But as you know, within our community, access to the internet, either because of not wanting to use the internet or because of financial reasons, that can be an issue. So that's a challenge in itself. And then the third one, having an emergency supply kit or go bag, that's another one. That's an issue that is really, I think it speaks to our economic system and the economic disparities. And I think that if one has wealth or financial resources, it's very easy to buy everything that one may need to prepare for emergency, including backup power sources and so on. But most of our consumers do not have the financial resources to purchase an emergency supply kit or at least fully loaded one. And so I have to, encourage them. I say, please don't get overwhelmed. If it's early in the season, I'll say it's early in the season. Let's, just get one item at a time, and just start working slowly at it as best you can, but don't get overwhelmed by it. But if you start early and purchase one item at a time, you will slowly build up your supplies and try to be as ready as possible. Um, but like I said, that can be very stressful for people as well because of our situation because of COVID and the economic situation that we're in now. A lot of people are out of work, which is an added stress and concern. So um, it's that can be an issue. The economic thing is huge, and people just do not have access to resources. And like I mentioned, the emergency drive-through event, we actually had planned to do it for 4 days, and everything was gone that we had, all our emergency supplies, PPE. We had a solar power radio, multi-purpose flashlight tool thing, along with PPE. And those were gone. Like the first day that we did it in Nevada County, everything was gone by 2 p.m. and it was a 10 a.m. to 4 p.m. So we ran out of over 250 bags that day, and we're going to do it on the 18th as well. Same thing happened in Yuba City. Everything was gone by 3 o'clock. So the need is there. It's very obvious. It's just a matter of how we can meet the needs in these very challenging times with climate collapse and everything that goes along with that. I heard that Alex Guinness is on here, so he knows all about that. And um, the fact that we're going to be encountering stronger weather systems and wildfires. And last year we had a situation where we're trying to do all the PSPS mitigation services and emergency preparedness plans, and we had the Jones fire here, and I almost had to evacuate, and I had to tell people I may not be here to deploy your battery to your home because I may have to evacuate. So it's it's an interesting balance of having to balance like my own life as a person with significant disabilities, and adapt to my own disabilities because even though I've had this disability throughout my entire life, I'm in the middle of trying to adapting. My eyesight has diminished so much in the last 2 years, and I'm trying to, even though I've been working on, adapting and using my screen reader, I'm having to do that in the middle of all of these crises plus the pandemic, and try to stay balanced for my family, and offer these services as well. So it's a delicate balance, and it's challenging to say the least. Um, so I don't know where we're at in that right now.
You did, you mentioned a lot of items, but I'm wondering about the money issue. Do you find yourself focusing with people on things that really don't cost money, but they can do anyways?
I mean, I'm trying to think what does not cost money. Because, what are you referring to that doesn't cost money?
Well, you mentioned, for example, medication list and a list of any devices that people use. Sometimes it's good to just help people, even if their trusted allies are only two people, to make sure that that list is in multiple places, and also in their grab and go, whatever they would grab and go in an emergency, things that don't cost money, but they want to remember to have them with them. Their glasses, their phone, their keys, just things that sometimes you panic when you have to leave quickly, and just having a list of, what you need to take, not that it costs money, but that you're going to need.
Okay.
Just things like that.
Yeah, I thank you for bringing that up. I do try to focus on that. And, like with regards to the five trusted allies, generally we can work through, um, because, the five trusted allies, they don't have to be local. We encourage people to have allies that are outside of, their county or even outside of the state, for, critical reasons such as communication, because during a disaster, as phone lines can be, overwhelmed and people can't get through. So it's good to have people outside of the states to use those circuits. Um, Not outside the states, but outside of the state they're in. And so I do try to focus on those things. And I really try to focus on not overwhelming them. I usually kind of front load the conversation with, I said, I know this may seem overwhelming, but let's focus on one thing at a time. And, we can work through this. And I also say, this is only the beginning of our conversation. I just say, I want you to think about these, think about who you can call. I mean, there has to be someone, neighbors, friends, even someone that they see at the grocery store that they connect with, someone. Um, and and I think I really try to focus on the hopeful aspect of it. This is an opportunity to build relationships and connections within our community locally that we have not done before. Because, as you know, and as Alex Guinness knows, in order to adapt to the crisis of climate change, we have to start, you know, connecting with each other locally so that we can adapt and thrive and get through this. And I think that, that's a local thing. That's a local level issue. And so I try to focus on those things that don't cost money. And I appreciate you bringing that up.
So I know we'll probably not be able to get through all of these questions, but I think I'll end with this one, and then when we turn to some of these questions during the more, casual discussion period. But does your contact with people regarding their individual plans occur over many meetings, or do you typically do it in just one meeting?
It depends. I mean, I think I would say like 95 to 98% of um, the request for an emergency preparedness. I mean, we have to do it as part of the DDR, is do an emergency plan in order to get a battery, to deploy a battery. They have to go through the plan. But I mean, that's really how we're getting referrals, is through either PG&E referrals, because of the public safety power shutoff, or because just requesting, batteries or hotel stays. So most of it goes through that process, which is required. And so it's generally, I spend somewhere between 30 and 40 minutes, 45 minutes, just talking about the plan and the battery and that whole process. And now I'm trying to kind of go back and try to reconnect with people, because those of you that are part of DDAR know how busy we get from the summer through now. It seems like it's being extended. It's going further into winter, the public safety power shutoffs. I think we had public safety power shutoffs not here in this region, but in Central California. We had some in January, which is unusual. In the past years, they've ended in November, and that's when the public safety power shut off. So now we're dealing with these crises for longer periods of time. Um, and Even now, I'm so grateful. We just had a snowstorm, so I'm just like, oh, thank you. This helps a little bit. It'll help for a little while, because I know it's coming. We're approaching the spring, and summer will be here, and we'll go through this all over again. But yeah, to answer the question, I am trying to follow up and see how people are doing, um, and see if they've developed their plans any further. But it's ultimately up to the consumer to take control and um, start moving forward. I think the unfortunate thing about doing this during public safety power shutoff season is people are already so stressed out, especially this last year because of COVID. I mean, they have apocalypse fatigue. Everybody is just exhausted and thinking about their own issues, their financial situation, the pandemic, and whatever else is going on. And so, a lot of people, when I talk about this, it's just another thing that they feel like they are overwhelmed with. So that's part of, part of going through this process is trying to um, meet people with where they are and understand how to approach this issue without overwhelming them or causing additional stress.
Okay, Ryan, well, thank you. We'll get back to some of these questions and questions from the listeners shortly, but I want to pivot to Alex. And Alex, I know you have some slides, so we'll over to you.
Thank you, June. My name is Alex Hatcher-Schoenbachler. I did leave the Schoenbachler out on my slides just to make it easier, but I appreciated June trying to pronounce that last name. Thank you. I am a light-skinned woman with medium and dark brown auburn hair, recently colored it, so my hair color has changed. I am an individual who identifies with multiple disabilities, ADHD, arthritis, and anxiety. And I am a IL coordinator, emergency preparedness educator at the Center for Independence in the Northtown counties, which is in Washington State. Our office is in Marysville, Washington, which is about 45 minutes north of Seattle. And the area and the counties that I serve are very rural. They are, I mean, the actual office is in Marysville, which is becoming a little bit more well, it is more populated, but then in about 15, 20 minutes, you start getting more rural. I don't know if any of you are familiar with the OSO 540 mudslide that we had back in 2014, but that resides in the Snohomish County area that I also serve. So there are a lot of issues with people being isolated and lack of transportation, and there are a lot of socioeconomic factors as well. So I will get right into the slides, and I just want to say that June, feel free to ask questions as you did with Brian with the slides. The slides will be taking us through kind of the process of what individual preparedness looks like and how we pair it with individual IL, independent living, and goals. So, and I will read the slides for access, just in case there is the need for that. So identifying where people are at in their individual preparedness. So back in 2018 in our center, we decided that it was important to put on participant intake paperwork to ask the question while people are being brought in working on certain goals. Usually people aren't coming in to work on an emergency plan. So asking the question of, do you have an emergency preparedness plan? And then the follow-up, either yes or no, we ask, are you interested in creating an individual preparedness plan? Next slide. So setting goals. Now in independent living, we individuals will be working on specific goals, and those goals can be housing or transportation, systems navigation of paperwork, and also individual preparedness. So speaking to individual preparedness for emergency preparedness, establishing where individuals are in their preparedness planning is the first step. If they agree and they want to work on it, then that is the first step. And we start to outline what that process is going to look like and setting up small action steps. Taking the main goal and breaking it into multiple and more manageable goals, and working on one or two goals at each meeting will depend on the individual, of course. So to give a little bit more in-depth what that looks like, if an individual comes in and they want to work on their individual emergency preparedness goal, and they don't have, we'll talk about this in the slides as we move on, but they don't have a lot of money. So always, I always start with the emergency contact and medication list, because that seems to be more digestible, easier, and not always easier, but it seems to be what costs no money, with no money involved in it. Next slide. And then here we talk about emergency contact and medical information. It's, like I said, it is a great starting point that costs little to no money. And Brian did touch on this as well. It can be challenging for individuals who do not have a large support network. And I've noticed a lot of individuals do kind of shut down because of the fact they do not have a support network. And it can be really hard. And so that's where we really need to, or I really work on letting them know that it's okay, that they don't have this, that we can figure out how to get some people on their support network, suggesting solutions, suggesting they attend our social and recreational group that meets monthly. Also, right now we're meeting on Zoom because of COVID, which has been really hard for everyone being isolated and having to do Zoom, but it's where we're at right now. So creating a support network, possibly having individuals, meet each other and maybe encouraging them to have conversations outside of the group and building a support network, and then just really tapping in and trying to figure out, maybe your caregiver can be one of those people, or maybe someone at the center can be emergency contact. We just have to really play with it and see how we can build that. Next slide. And here are some examples of emergency contact form. I do apologize that I tried to make them as large as possible without distorting them. It's just an example of some forms we use. I work with a lot of people with traumatic brain injury, and so a lot of times the color coding on forms really do help individuals, and so that's why this one has different colors on it. There's blue and pink and beige and white on this form. It helps people with cognitive disabilities sometimes and ADHD and things like that. So that's why I've colored it like this, and I've noticed that it does help sometimes. But a form is a form, and it can be as simple. It doesn't have to be this detailed, but I just noticed it does help with some of the participants that I work with. Next slide, please. This is one of June's forms that we've adopted and we've used for many years in our presentations and with our participants. It's a neighborhood contact list and emergency contact or neighborhood contact list. And again, it is color coded a little bit with red and yellow on top. And again, this can be really hard. A lot of people are isolated. A lot of people choose to not really talk to their neighbors nowadays. So this might be an additional goal that we work on. Like, your goal this week is to make contact with your neighbor, introduce yourself, and I know it's hard during COVID, but to have that conversation and maybe build some type of community where you live if you don't already have that. Next slide, please. So addressing emergency preparedness on a budget. I can tell you that a majority, 95% of the people that I work with do not have any extra income to work on an emergency preparedness kit. And it's almost, it is a point where people just say, no, I don't want to do that, because they know they don't have the money. And so they just don't think about they don't want to think about it at all, because it's just another burden on them on top of what they're having to deal with their disability, possibly medications, possibly durable medical equipment, whatever they may need, transportation. Even though they know it's really important, it's another thing. So that's where we address the issue of not having money to start an emergency preparedness kit or to stays at home, or a grab and go bag that you can take with you. Suggestions such as dollar store or other discount stores, donations from nonprofits, and things they may already have at home. And then these are all goals that are broken down in individual goals that we can work on. So it's not overwhelming. So it's not like, oh my gosh, it's so much to do. Break them down in smaller pieces so it can be more manageable. and then talking about budgeting. And, really having a real conversation is like, that budgeting might be only $1 or $2. That's all that individual has left over. So that $1 or $2 is something they can get from the dollar store or somewhere, a discount store or wherever it may be. And they can add to their kit, whether that's water or food or things like that. It becomes a real challenge on this one. I know that, and then of course our center this year, and our center always goes to an organization called World Vision, and we pick up supplies, and we try to make sure when we pick up those supplies, the supplies that we can assist and give to our participants to add to their kits, to add things. And they do give things like rice and beans and lentils and water. It varies a lot, but we try to pick up a lot of that stuff. And we did use our COVID CARES Act funding this year to purchase put together small emergency preparedness kits, which had masks, water, hand sanitizer, and some snack bars in a bag. And we delivered those out to participants' doorsteps and also to some of our homeless shelters and cold weather stations this winter. Next slide, please. So how do we determine success? Well, our center uses a database. A lot of centers do. A lot of organizations do as well. And that's where we record our independent living goals. So we determine success by documenting our work in that database for each individual participant. Hard copies that we have in file systems, and then of course the database holds electronic copies, and those records contain the action steps and the goals set. So it's nice because we also will email this information and provide hard copies to the participant we're working with. But if the participant is not able to locate that or needs information, we have those in hard copies. So if we can't access electronic copies, we can access the hard copies, and we can continue to work on our goals. Success is also determined by completion of those action steps, and the goals completed, and the individual having the emergency preparedness plans and or kits, grab-and-go bags in place. That looks different for everyone. Not everyone is working on every single thing. A lot of people might just be working on the emergency contact information. Some people might just be working on the budget to be able to purchase things. So it'll look different for everyone, but it's important to have a tracking system of the success, because it's helpful for the participant, because it feels good to know that you've actually accomplished something. And that's one less thing you have in place. One less thing you have to worry about. Okay, I've accomplished this goal. Now I can work on the next goal. Now I can slowly but surely take this huge thing that's so overwhelming, and now I have one whole thing. Next slide, please. So how often do we check in on individuals? Like I mentioned just now, since IO goals look different for everyone, it's important to have a conversation with the individual to talk about when we'll be checking in for reminders on updating information, supplies, durable medical equipment, whatever that looks like for the participant. If they're completed their goals, if the goals are completed, then usually I try to do, and their file is still open, I like to do a monthly check-in on this specific goal. How are things going? Do we need to update contact information, medications? How does that look? Do we need to re-look at what that looks like for your medications? Do you need to talk to your doctor? Do you need advocacy to get more medications for your supply? What does that look like? And if they're closed and they've completed all their goals, I still like to check in with them every 6 months, just to say, hey, how's it going? Did you remember to rotate your supplies? Do you want to work on these? So I like to keep them open, just with this goal in place, so we can have that communication every month. But some people don't need that. So, but that's what I would like to do. I think that would be great to have that constant communication. Next slide. So what works well? Again, asking individuals if they have an emergency preparedness plan on day one of working together. I find that puts it in people's brains to, okay, oh, I wasn't thinking about that. Oh, okay, that's important. Even if they don't say yes, they want to work on it, it's been asked, it's there. And we do offer quarterly individual emergency preparedness meetings. It's so weird now because we're all on Zoom. So they're through Zoom now, but people will come to the center or we'll do it in another organization and partner with, for instance, we've done one with the ARC of Snohomish County here, where we just provide individual preparedness information and go through an hour-long presentation and take questions. So there's that as well. So we do continue to offer that, even if someone's not working on those goals. Hey, do you want to attend this event we're having? There'll be snacks. We'll talk about individual preparedness. I always say bring food. People come when there's food. So yeah, breaking the individual preparedness goals down into smaller goals, I found that's very successful. For me, with the disabilities that I have ADHD, and things get overwhelming and I just shut down. So I need it broken in pieces, and especially it's scary to plan because it makes you think about disasters. So taking the fear out of planning is important. Making it fun, making it a conversation, making it not that, even though it is that one more thing to do, just having it to be, reframing it as it's a goal. It's just the same as your housing goal. It's the same as your transportation goal. It's going to make your life better. Maybe not right now, but when a disaster hits, you'll have this information in place. You'll have your contacts. You'll have your food or water if you have to stay in place. So it's having that conversation and taking the fear out of it. It works very well, and trying to make it fun. Next slide. What needs work? Well, increasing the number of individuals to work on individual preparedness goals. I will say that it's 50-50. I don't get everyone that sign up that they don't want to work on the goals. And I want to say, but you should. And I want to say, you really need to do this, but it's a personal choice. Nobody has to do it. It's an individual it's independent living. And it's about empowering and showing people how and not doing for. And so you have to remember that. And since like I said in the slide, since independent living goals are a choice, individual can opt out not to work on these goals. So that needs work, but then you're also going against personal choice. So I guess it's really just my preparedness and planning hat that is like, this should just be what we should do no matter what. But that's again. So that's what needs work. And I think also to push it out, it's not on the slide, but also what needs work is to push it out to more organizations, community organizations. So they are working with their participants, their clients as well on these, and working and calling the center or calling people who have experience and coming and presenting and just building it up. So. And I think that's it. Next slide. Thank you.
Well, Alex, that was both of you. That's a lot to take in, a lot to unpack and digest. Lots of really good information there. So I urge you all to post questions for the speaker in chat, or raise your hand, which is a function in the participant list. You'll see a hand logo that you can just raise. So I think we have one question already posted in chat. So over to you, Megan, to read that.
Yeah, this is Megan.
Before we get to that, may I address one thing that Alex mentioned?
Sure, go ahead.
Yeah, this is really important, and thank you for mentioning the transportation issue, Alex, because in rural communities, especially here in Northern California, um, transportation is a serious problem for people with disabilities and older adults. For instance, in Nevada County, we have paratransit, and it only travels 3/4 of a mile outside of the fixed bus route system, which is profoundly limiting in rural communities because the situation is, so if you want to live close to town, you have to pay a lot more. And so a lot of people with disabilities that are on low income, they live further out and are more isolated and are often outside of the paratransit corridor. And that's a serious problem. And so we're trying to work with paratransit to extend that, especially for emergencies and disasters, because people are often isolated simply because there are no affordable, accessible transportation options. For instance, even here, we don't have Uber or Lyft. So it's paratransit or asking a neighbor or so that's something that we're trying to work on as well. And thank you for allowing me to address that.
Brian, while you're still on there, I do see a question from Jose. Can you just slowly repeat those 5 Listo steps?
Okay. So the Listos campaign has 4 steps. And the first step is finding 5 trusted allies to contact in an emergency. That's the first step. The next step, number 2, is making a list of medications, medical devices, and accessories. The third step is creating a go bag or emergency supply kit. And I should mention that the emergency supply kit is very personalized. There are fully fulfilled emergency supply kits out there that you can purchase. But when it comes to our community, people with disabilities, they're very personalized. So it's important to, consider that when, if one does want to purchase one, there has to be consideration of, okay, if I have this bag that I purchase, is this going to be too much, too little? What is it? Everybody has their own needs when it comes to durable medical equipment and life-sustaining medical devices and so on. So there's kind of a balancing act of, I think you mentioned have supplies for 2 weeks. I think often the other option is having supplies for 3 days. So it's really a matter of, what someone is comfortable with and what they can manage in a crisis. And then, so that's 3. The 4th step is finding escape routes. So that means traveling those escape routes is really beneficial to travel them after the sun goes down, because that is more like what it would be like let's, for instance, for a wildfire. If there's a ton of videos, if you can go on YouTube and see people fleeing from the Paradise Fire. And when you watch those videos, I don't know because I can't see, but it looks like you can't tell what time of day it is. It's so disorienting. So it's really important to travel those after dark and to get a sense of what it would be like, in a disaster type situation. So those are the 4 steps. 1, finding 5 trusted allies. 2, making a list of medications, medical devices, and accessories. 3, creating a emergency supply kit, go bag. Number 4, finding your escape routes.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. This is Megan. I'll go ahead and start reading the questions we've received. And please remember, you can raise your hand to ask a question too. Christina wants to know, Alex and Brian, have either of you had a consumer contact you after a disaster to thank you or talk you through how their preparedness plan worked or needed to be improved?
Alex, would you like to go first?
Yes, I can talk to that. This is Alex. Actually, yes, I did help an individual prepare their preparedness, individual preparedness kit. Actually, it was emergency contact information and a small grab and go kit. And it was some flooding that was up in one of our rural counties, and they had to leave and they had to go to a shelter for, it was only a day, but they were able to grab their grab and go kit that had their emergency contact information sealed in a plastic bag to protect from water or anything like that. A very simple Ziploc gallon bag, didn't have to spend a lot of money on it. It sealed it, it kept it safe. And we did have contact, and yeah, they were very appreciative of the having it, because when they went to the shelter, they had all their information that they needed. They had medication, they had some snacks that they liked to have, you know, and was good for their dietary restrictions and concerns. And so that was one incident I can recall. And as far as like working and revising it, I had a couple people contact me last year in the onset of COVID, talking about wanting to update their kit to have, you know, obviously masks and more of those type of hand sanitizer and gloves, because that wasn't something that they had in their kit. And of course, now we're in the middle of a pandemic, they're like, well, I really need to like get this kit, you know, updated to reflect the disaster that we're in right now, because it was much needed. And so there's been a shift in what goes into kits. Not that those should not have been there before, but I will be perfectly honest. We were preparing for flooding and fires and earthquakes and things like that. And even though I've worked with the Department of Health and talked about pandemics and things like that, you know, we're all learning, we're all growing, and it was not something that was high on the list of me thinking about. And so I've learned, you know, lessons learned, best practices as we're living it. So I hope that answered your question.
Sounds good. Thank you. Let's see. Do you want to take the question, Megan, from Alex Guinness?
Yes, I'll go ahead and read that out. So it's specifically addressed to you, Brian. People with disabilities are disproportionately affected by both utility transmission caused fires and PSPS events meant to prevent fires. How do you talk to people with disabilities who both want fire safety and stable electricity? How does that affect your recommendations?
Let me see if I understand this correctly. So is it somebody that is asking what to focus on, you know, fire hazard mitigation versus preparing for public safety power shutoff? I'm not sure what the question is asking.
Alex, you went on mute. Go ahead. Alex.
Sure. Yeah. I mean, you know, in some workshops I've been a part of around the PSPS events, people basically right off the bat say, you know, we want stable electricity, full stop. When like the nature of the PSPS events is to prevent the fires that disproportionately affect the community. So it's kind of a stuck between a rock and a hard place sort of a thing. Mm-hmm. And I think that some members of the community don't like fully grasp the kind of conundrum we're stuck in, right? Mm-hmm. So how do you communicate that? Does that affect your recommendations? And, you know, I know that the things that you would do to prepare for wildfires, a lot of those are still applicable to the PSPS events. So kind of how all of that comes together and how you talk to folks on the ground.
Thank you. I appreciate your question. Yeah, I mean, I would say 90% of the conversations that I have, consumers are expressing how unhappy they are with the public safety power shutoff events, and they don't understand why they are happening. And I try to explain that it's to prevent wildfires. And if they don't, a lot of people say that that's baloney. You know, they don't use that word, but they use something a little stronger. And and so I often say, well, there is photographic evidence. PG&E has to share this information with the California Public Utility Commission. There is evidence of the damage that is done because of the wind events and what it does to the power grid. And so I try to do that. And then if they usually, even that sometimes is not enough. And I think that just comes from the frustration of the situation itself. And so I try to focus, on the fact that this is happening. It's not something that's going to change. The last meeting that I was in at this Capitol about this issue, the vice president of PG&E at that time, I don't remember what his full title was, but he said that it's going to last for 7 years until the system can be hardened and changes can be made. I will say this, that I do try to reinforce the fact that even from 2019 until now, PS events have become shorter. More microgrids have been operational. And so things are improving, even though people are still disproportionately affected by it. And the other issue is I try to work on talking with PG&E about the fact that it's not enough. Public safety power shutoffs are one issue, but people with disabilities that use durable medical equipment or life-sustaining medical devices are still affected by accident-related outage, maintenance-related outages, weather-related outages. So that issue still needs to be addressed. And Christina from CFILC, Christina Mills, she's working with PG&E to make that point clear, and she's done excellent work on that, as well as Anna Acton, the executive director of Freed, and others from other ILCs as well. So yeah, and I do try to focus on, okay, this is the situation we're in. Let's prepare. Well, I mean, the bottom line is, as Alex and everybody else knows, that we're in a time where multiple crises and disasters are happening simultaneously, and COVID-19 plus wildfires is a perfect example in California. So, and I try to let consumers know without overwhelming them that this is the situation we're in, and it's not going to change. It's, in fact, we're probably going to be, we need to prepare for the worst, because we don't know what's on this journey ahead that we're going to face. We're definitely going to face wildfires. We're probably going to face more pandemics and other types of disasters. So I try to, explore that with the consumer in a humorous and relaxed way as best I can.
Well said, Brian. It's June, I think, and in the chat too, people are saying, the intensity and the scale of emergencies due to climate change and other human-caused and natural events is scaling up, not down. And you have to kind of get out of the public safety power shutoff silo in terms of thinking about our preparedness. I want to stir it up a little bit. I want to say some things that are controversial to get you to push back at me, but
exciting.
Yeah. So these emergency kits, it's not my first rodeo with these kits. I've been thinking about them for a long time. And frankly, I think the parts of the kits that don't cost money are much more important than the parts of the kits that do. I've worked as a contractor with many disability organizations who have given these kits out over the years. And we've actually looked at their impact and their effect over time. 6 months later, and a year later, and maybe there's been no emergency, but the kits have been totally degraded. They've been, oh, I'm hungry, I'm going to eat that snack bar, or oh yeah, I need that flashlight to repair my bed, or so they're rated, and that's one issue. The other issue is in working with people with disabilities, they give everyone this great kit, and they gave me one as a trainer, and I couldn't even take up the kit. It was so heavy. So I just think we need to be a little more thoughtful about and sensitive about these kits. I mean, how effective are they? You know, have we really looked at, do they work over time? And what about the parts that don't cost any money, but are critical to people having? So push back. Let's stir it up a bit.
Alex, do you want to push back first?
This is Alex. Yeah. I'm not going to push back on the part that doesn't cost money, because I believe that is the most important part as well. It's always been my starting point. And I think that comes from, well, I know that comes from the fact that I know individuals don't have a lot of money. So I don't want to deter them from preparing. So I'm like, okay, we're starting here. But it's the one thing, I don't know how well I'm doing pushing back, but it's the one thing that doesn't get rated. It's the one thing, because, I mean, a lot of individuals have families. And I'll tell you, with myself, I have 5 children. We're grown now, but we've had our kids, and those kids got rated while they're snacks. So yeah, the weight of the kit. Yeah, that's another issue. They're sometimes so heavy. How are you going to even carry it around? Or if you're, it just doesn't, or how if you have equipment to use equipment, or you might use mobility equipment, or what does that look like? I mean, how are you going to move your stuff around? So I don't know. I didn't really push back at you, June. I kind of more agreeing with you. But I just feel like, you know, that's a good, we need to monitor it more, because, I mean, yeah, I do the check-ins, but really, is there data on how effective they are? Instead of just get a kit, let's get a kit. And I think it would be beneficial to see what the data looks like and have it more structured for all of us to use as a tool for our best practices, how we can better make digital preparedness for individuals.
You know, guys and women, for me, the most important part of my grab and go kit is at the door, and it's a list of what I need to grab, because it's not in the kit. It's the hearing aids, it's the glasses, it's a cane, it's my phone charger, it's my wallet, it's my, you know, I can't even remember what's on the list, but it's written down and it's prioritized. So if I only have a minute, I get number 1. If I have 3 minutes, maybe I get 1 through 3. If I have 5 minutes, I might be able to get all of it. But that to me is the most important part of the no-cost part of my kit and what I do. And I don't even have a kit at the door. I just have a little vest that I put on, and it's got a little bit of $1 bills in it, and, you know, just little things I know I'll need, but that I can put on and still use my hands to walk, and I can carry it. So that's one idea.
So this is Alex. Little bit of pushback, not really, but
she's coming back. Here she goes.
Good. Give it to me.
So I think that's great, because that works for you. And again, we talked about, you know, everything is individualized for you as the person. But I immediately thought, oh my goodness, what if you only have a minute to get out and you don't get everything that you need? That was the first thing I thought of, which if it works for you, it works for you. And that is how we'll roll with it, and we'll empower and, show you how to improve it. But I worry about that a little bit. And it is interesting because, the weight of the bag and having all these things, and that is very much a barrier. But if you don't have seconds or backups and you only have a couple minutes to get out, your house is on fire or the house is falling down from the earthquake, I worry about how will you get those things wherever you're going. So, food for thought.
This is Megan. We have a question here from Leah. She wants to know, can you guys elaborate a little more about what you mean when you talk about the parts that don't cost money? Do you mean you're working on a plan with somebody, on their individual plan? What do you mean there?
Brian?
I mean my neighborhood list is in a hard copy. I mean my emergency contact list is in a hard copy. And you know what? If I don't have my cell phone, I don't know anyone's phone number, even my husband's cell number. I don't know it because I just say, "Hey Siri, call Bob." So it's the printed out phone numbers that I have there. It doesn't cost. What it costs is my time and my anxiety to think about putting it together. That's the cost, but it doesn't cost money.
This is Alex. Yes, exactly that. The things, it might cost you your time, but it's not going to cost you money. And speaking from being a coordinator and educator, with the center, we're more than happy to print that information out and put it in a Ziploc bag so people can be set up for success. And that's exactly it. It doesn't cost money. And building those relationships with your neighborhood. Yeah, sorry.
I have to eject. The other day I was thinking about this and I did a little, my husband said, "What are you doing?" So I put some paper in a Ziploc bag. I closed the Ziploc bag and I put it in the sink to see if it was really waterproof. And guess what? It wasn't. So it was the one with the little plastic zip, because that's easier for me than the one at the press. And it wasn't waterproof. So I just wanted to inject that. Sorry, I couldn't resist. So we need to think through. Maybe we need to double bag or triple bag this stuff. And the one other thing I want to add is in earthquake country, I have a contact list that means I call someone out of state and then they are responsible, if I reach them, for calling everyone else and telling them I'm okay, because chances are the phone system is not going to work real well once there's an earthquake. The lines are going to be jammed, go down, whatever. So it's that hard copy of that out of area contact list for emergencies as well.
This is Megan. There's a really great suggestion from Vivian in the chat. She says you can, if you're working in the office, you can use a laminator at your office to laminate the contact list for your consumers. And then we have a comment here from Marquis, and I wonder if he actually wants to jump on and elaborate more. He says, I might even say that disaster kits can be somewhat counterproductive.
Yeah, sure. Hi, my name is Marcus, and I'm the emergency management coordinator from Skill in Claremont. And kind of what I meant by that comment was that consumers can often kind of get their kit and disappear and think that that is enough, for them to be prepared. And so I think that it's very important that a preparedness plan goes hand in hand with any sort of materials and or supplies that we give to our consumers. So it's kind of my idea.
This is Alex. I agree. I see what you're saying. Yeah, it kind of gives us people a false sense of security, thinking, oh, I'm good to go. If there's a disaster and I have everything I need. Yeah, I agree. I see that too. Thank you. Good point.
Yeah, Marcus, I love that point. It's June. I want to tell a story that I was at in City Hall once talking to an attorney who said to me, you know, if only you people with disabilities were better prepared, we wouldn't have all these problems. And I thought, oh boy, how am I going to handle this one? So I said, well, let's do a contest. You know, my emergency kit is in my car, which is 3 stories underground. So I can't get to it. But let's do a contest. What emergency things do you actually have on you at the moment? What emergency things do you actually keep with you? I call it Kiwi. Keep it with you. And, you know, I won that contest, you know, hand over whatever you call it. But I had a flashlight. I had a thumb drive with info. I had a snack bar in my briefcase. I had my contact list in the briefcase. I had emergency health information in the wallet. So, and you know, it's like these kids, you know, maybe you'll get to them and maybe you won't. But, you know, let's also think about what we keep it with us at all times. Keep it with us.
I certainly agree with the I'm sorry to interrupt. Just whoever said that the material in the kit that doesn't cost any money is probably more valuable. And I would assume that's more information and planning oriented. And I couldn't agree with that more. I think that's what my main focus is here at Skill anyway. Thank you.
This is Alex. Thank you. This is Alex. Something that we do is part of our quarterly educational events for emergency preparedness is that we actually have a fun activity, a scavenger hunt, that we have a sheet of things. I wish I had the visual, so I'll try to like explain it to you. A sheet that has a scavenger hunt on it. It says a lighter or a cell phone or a charger, shoelaces, plastic bag, food, water. It's a list of things that you would put into a grab and go kit. And then so everyone gets the list and they have 10 minutes, and we either, depending on the size of the group, we either do individual or they pair up in groups. And so they have to find all these things. You can't go to your car. You can't leave where you're sitting. It's right there with you, if your backpack or you're on your person or your purse, whatever it looks like. And they try to get as many things on their list to check off. And then, of course, they get so many points. And if they win, they get something to put in their kit, basically, to add to their kit. And it helps exactly what Jim was just talking about. It helps individuals think about, I forgot how you identified it, June. You said keep
it with you.
Keep it with you. And so it just shows people the importance of, like, if something started shaking, earthquakes is always the thing we talk about, but something happened right now, if the train derailed and we were all stuck here, what do you have right now? And some people just have like everything, and I'm just amazed, and some people, would be lucky to have, some gum or something, but, some people travel light and some people don't, but that's a good point. Like you said, I think and going back to just keeping it fun, when Brian was talking about that as well, it takes the fear out of it and it gets people thinking. And that's really what we're trying to do, is get people thinking, empower them, show them how, and give them the tools.
I do like that exercise. I want to steal that. That's a great one, Alex.
Megan, I just wanted to read the chat. Vivian says, when I do emergency preparedness with our consumers, I encourage them to continue attending the emergency preparedness workshops. I told them it's important that we really have to practice.
Great point. Yeah, I think, this is multiple exposure material, June here. I think, we can't be reminded of what's really important too often. And we've learned a lot over the years. I never would have pushed back years ago on the value of the kits and buying supplies, but I know more now than I did last week. So any hands raised? I don't see any hands raised in chat. Any more comments, questions, concerns? We didn't talk, Brian talked a lot about transportation. And I've been thinking a lot about if all else fails and there's no phone and there's no power and there's no cell tower, would I be able to get to a neighbor for help? What would it take? And I imagine where, Brian, you live, and my neighbor is not that far away, but I still need to be able to get to them. So I think a big question is, besides your contact list, can you get to a neighbor? And so that's one issue. The other issue is transportation. And for many people, that is the unanswered question. How am I going to get out of here if, for example, if I have a car, but it's buried in the garage and the earthquake has made the garage unusable, or I have no car? What am I going to do? What's the plan if I have to leave the neighborhood?
Yeah, this is Alex. Thinking about worst case scenario, if infrastructure really is collapsed, then everything is going to be changed in transportation and paratransit, and buses aren't going to be able to run. So it's really going to have to be depending on that, your very closest circle. Exactly what you said, the person lives next door or hopefully close. And that is honestly something that I don't have an answer for. It keeps me up at night, I'll tell you that, but it's kind of a terrifying thought when where are you going to go? How are you going to get transportation? Even like right now during, the pandemic and individuals needing to get to vaccines, and we have infrastructure, there's a barrier with transportation. So I wish I had the answer. I don't even have a resource-based solution for that. Just knowing it just to building that inner circle, even if you don't have a relationship with your neighbors, seeing if you can, hey, having that awkward conversation. I know we don't talk a lot, but if something were to happen, I need assistance. Can I depend on you? Just having to work on, and that can be hard for a lot of people, being vulnerable, opening yourself up, not wanting, especially if you have some type of cognitive disability or or mental health, any type of disability that might give you a barrier on that, or just overall not wanting to ask for help, that's going to have to be addressed. And that, as Brian was even talking on, that you have to have empathy for that, and you have to work through it. And that might even be a goal to work on, to how to better your communication with individuals, because it's a barrier for you. You don't like to talk to people. So there's that. And then if disaster were to happen, you say contact, and maybe some way, somehow there can be some type of connection to know that maybe it's not your neighbor, but someone that's in the area can come and check on you if they're able to. Yeah, that's a hard question, but I wanted to try to address it. I don't have all the answers yet, and I learned from all of you and gather all the information, because we're all partners in this. Even though we might not be in the same state, we're all learning from each other every day. So appreciate you all.
And I would like to say, I feel like I'm relatively new to this process, and I know June, you've been working on this and thinking about this since the Poseidon Adventure film came out, right? So you have an enormous amount of knowledge and experience firsthand through multiple disasters and emergencies. And I would like to share something, because I think it says something about our culture that we live in, and our, economic system. I'll give you an example. I have I'm working with a consumer that lives in her own home. She's not able to leave her home. She has not left her home in 5 years. And she uses a power wheelchair. She's paralyzed, I believe, on one side, if not more. And I try to talk to her about creating a plan. And she says, my plan is that when a wildfire comes through, I'm going to hope that the smoke inhalation ends it. And I think it says a lot. And I've heard this before. This is not the first time I've heard people basically committing, or you saying that they're going, I shouldn't use the term commit, but that they're thinking about ending their life when a disaster comes. Because they feel they don't have the resources, they don't have the relationships, they don't have the financial resources to get through it. And I think this is something, being that we're experiencing climate change and its adverse effects, a discussion that we all need to have, not just people with disabilities, but everyone needs to talk about community resiliency, working on mutual aid when because I think Vance talks about it all the time from Cal OES, and his former the person in Richard DeVilder, and the former chief of access and functional needs at Cal OES. Vance and him both stated that we have to respond as if no one is coming. So how do we do that? And it's a massive systemic issue that needs to be addressed. And so I think it's something that it's a great place to begin these conversations with our neighbors, friends, and community members.
Yep. Brian, there is a question from Taylor about Disability Services and Legal Center. They're creating a neighbor communication workshop related to what we're talking about. And any suggestions? Taylor, one suggestion I've had is for those neighborhoods that still have neighborhood watch meetings or neighborhood barbecues. Around here, we have a neighborhood cleanup day. That's a chance to infuse in those meetings, formally or informally. Can we talk a little bit about an emergency and how we would help each other? And take a few minutes in any of those settings where there's a natural clumping of neighbors to bring that up. Or if you meet a neighbor at a mailbox or on a walk or a roll, to just do the same kind of thing. Right? There are a lot of strategies that need to be built out in that area, but I think we need to focus more on that. I'm glad you're working on that workshop, and maybe we'll talk more about that.
June has his hand up, and then I know we have the poll to get to.
Yeah. So let me end real quick. Thanks a lot. Thanks, Brian.
Thank you.
Great, thoughtful, thorough, sharing your time and knowledge with us today. You're going to join us next month for a talk on homelessness and disability. And thanks to all of you. We beg you to complete the poll that Megan's going to put up real quick. And we thank you for the privilege of your time and your participation and your feedback to come.